Rain hammered relentlessly against the rusted roof of the old family house as workers in reflective safety vests moved across the front yard, stretching measuring tapes and preparing the property as though its future had already been decided. Two men stood near the entrance, driving a large red sign into the muddy ground until the bold words became impossible to ignore. Sold. Property under new ownership. Just as they finished, a black SUV screeched to a stop outside the gate. The passenger door flew open, and Amara Akafer stepped out wearing the same simple black dress she had traveled in after receiving the devastating news of her mother's death. Her face was swollen from hours of crying, but the grief that had followed her across the ocean was suddenly replaced by complete disbelief. She stood frozen, unable to understand why strangers were walking around the family compound as though they owned every inch of it. I came home to bury my mother. Instead, I found strangers claiming the only home my family had ever known. Slowly, Amara took a trembling step toward the gate, desperately hoping there had been some terrible mistake. A quiet whisper escaped her lips as she stared at the sign, shaking her head in disbelief. Before she could ask a single question, one of the men approached with a folder tucked beneath his arm. His expression suggested he understood this was an impossible conversation, but he continued anyway. He politely explained that any personal belongings would need to be removed before the following morning because the property would officially change hands then. For a moment, Amara couldn't even respond. The words made no sense. Her mother hadn't even been laid to rest. Her body was still in the morgue awaiting burial. How could anyone possibly be talking about handing over the family home? When she finally found her voice, she quietly told him that her mother's body was still in the morgue. The man offered his condolences with genuine sympathy before looking toward the veranda and gently explaining that if she wanted answers, she would have to speak with her brother because he was the one who had signed every document. With her heart pounding harder than ever before, Amara slowly turned toward the house. Standing on the veranda was her older brother, David. He didn't rush toward her. He didn't call her name. He didn't even attempt to explain what was happening. Instead, he simply lowered his eyes, unable to meet his sister's gaze. In that painful moment, everything changed. The man responsible for selling the only home their family had ever known wasn't a dishonest stranger or a ruthless businessman. It was her own brother. And as shocking as that discovery was, it turned out to be only the beginning. What Amara uncovered over the next 3 days would force her to question everything she thought she knew about her family, their past, and the heartbreaking secret that had been hiding in plain sight all along. There are moments in life when grief arrives exactly the way we expect it. A phone call in the middle of an ordinary day, a trembling voice on the other end of the line, the unbearable words that tell us someone we love is gone forever. Most people believe that losing a parent is the greatest heartbreak they will ever experience. But sometimes life has a way of proving that sorrow can wear more than one face. Sometimes the funeral isn't the hardest part. Sometimes the real pain begins after the tears have started to dry, when secrets hidden for years suddenly come crashing into the light. This is the story of a family whose foundation was shaken long before the funeral service ever began. It is a story about love, sacrifice, betrayal, and the impossible choices that can tear even the closest families apart. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now settle in, because what happened to Amara and David is a reminder that sometimes the people we think we understand the most are carrying burdens we never imagined. For as long as anyone could remember, the Akafer family home had stood quietly at the end of a peaceful street, watching generations grow up beneath its weathered roof. It wasn't the biggest house in the neighborhood, and it certainly wasn't the newest, but to the people who lived there, it represented something money could never replace. Every faded wall held memories of birthday celebrations, family dinners, laughter that echoed late into warm evenings, and tears that had been shared during difficult seasons. Their father had poured every bit of strength he had into building that house with his own hands before his life was cut tragically short. After his passing, Mama Ngozi refused to let grief destroy the family he had worked so hard to create. She became the heart of that home, raising David and Amara with unwavering determination despite the endless challenges of being a widowed mother. She believed that a home was measured not by expensive furniture or polished floors, but by the kindness shown within its walls. Neighbors often joked that if Mama Ngozi's porch light was on, nobody in the community would ever go to bed hungry because she always found room for one more person at her table. Thousands of miles away in London, Amara had built a life she hoped would make her mother proud. At 31, she had established a successful career, rented a comfortable apartment, and tried to balance work with regular phone calls home. Yet, like so many people living abroad, she constantly carried the quiet guilt of not visiting often enough. Every holiday she promised herself that next year she would stay longer. Every goodbye at the airport became just a little harder than the last. Her mother never complained. Instead, she always encouraged Amara to keep chasing her dreams, reminding her that opportunities should never be wasted simply because they required sacrifice. Those conversations became a source of comfort whenever homesickness crept in. Amara believed there would always be another phone call, another visit, another chance to sit beside her mother beneath the old mango tree and listen to stories she'd already heard 100 times but never grew tired of hearing. She had no way of knowing that one unanswered message would become the greatest regret she would carry for the rest of her life. The morning everything changed began like countless others. The coffee was still warm, emails were waiting to be answered, and the world outside her apartment carried on with its usual rhythm. Then her phone rang. Seeing her mother's name on the screen brought an instant smile to her face, but the moment she answered, something felt terribly wrong. Instead of the familiar warmth she expected, she heard the broken voice of Aunt Grace struggling to speak through tears. Sometimes grief needs only a single sentence to change someone's entire future, and when Aunt Grace whispered that Mama Ngozi was gone, the world around Amara seemed to stop moving. The coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered across the kitchen floor, but she barely noticed. Every plan she had made suddenly disappeared. Every deadline lost its importance. Nothing mattered anymore except getting home. As she packed her suitcase through blurred vision, one painful thought kept repeating itself over and over. She hadn't answered her mother's last message. 3 simple days had passed, and what she thought was a small delay had become a silence that could never be undone. During the long flight home, sleep refused to come. Instead, Amara found herself staring out the airplane window while replaying memories she had once taken for granted. She remembered family Christmas mornings when David insisted on opening presents before sunrise. She remembered helping her mother prepare meals for neighbors who were struggling financially. She remembered sitting beside her father as a little girl while he explained why every brick in their home mattered, because each one represented hope for the future. Most vividly of all, she remembered the words her mother had spoken years earlier while holding her hand during another journey home. Home is never just a building. It's the people waiting inside. At the time, those words had sounded comforting. Now they echoed through her mind with heartbreaking irony because the person who had always been waiting for her would never greet her again. She closed her eyes and silently promised herself that she would honor her mother's memory the best way she knew how. She believed she was flying home to say goodbye. She had no idea she was also flying into the middle of a family crisis that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her brother. While Amara crossed continents, David stood alone on the veranda of the family home, staring at the empty rocking chair where their mother had spent countless evenings watching the neighborhood children play. The silence around him felt heavier than words could describe. His phone had become a constant source of pressure, vibrating every few minutes with calls he no longer wanted to answer. Each conversation sounded the same: promises, deadlines, demands. The people calling weren't interested in funeral arrangements or grieving families. They wanted possession of a property, signatures honored, and agreements fulfilled. David rubbed his tired eyes as another unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. The voice on the other end reminded him that tomorrow meant tomorrow, not next week, and certainly not after the funeral. By the time the call ended, he remained standing in the same spot, whispering words only the wind could hear. He insisted to himself that he had done what he believed was necessary. Whether anyone else would ever understand was another matter entirely. Even he wasn't sure he believed his own explanation anymore. When Amara finally arrived at the family compound, the familiar sights and sounds offered a brief sense of comfort. Relatives had already gathered to help prepare for the funeral. Large pots simmered over outdoor fires, while neighbors arranged chairs beneath white canopies. Children who usually filled the compound with laughter played quietly instead, sensing that this was not an ordinary family gathering. The smell of home wrapped around her as she walked through the gate, and for a fleeting moment she imagined nothing had changed except the heartbreaking absence of her mother. Then she saw David. They embraced without speaking, each holding on to the other as though they were trying to keep years of shared memories from slipping away. When they finally stepped apart, Amara noticed something she couldn't quite explain. Her brother looked exhausted, but it wasn't only grief she saw in his eyes. It was fear. Fear so deep that it lingered even when he tried to force a reassuring smile. She wanted to believe she was imagining it. Before the night was over, she would discover she wasn't. The evening settled over the neighborhood with a quiet heaviness that seemed to match the mood inside the Akafer family home. As more relatives arrived, stories about Mama Ngozi began flowing from every corner of the compound. One neighbor remembered how she had secretly paid school fees for children whose parents could not afford them. Another recalled the countless evenings she spent delivering warm meals to elderly residents who had no family nearby. Everyone seemed to have a memory that revealed another layer of the remarkable woman they had lost. Amara listened carefully, smiling through tears as she realized her mother's kindness had reached far beyond the walls of their home. Yet while everyone else found comfort in remembering the past, she couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that kept drawing her attention toward David. He laughed when people expected him to laugh, nodded politely during conversations, and accepted condolences with quiet gratitude. But his eyes constantly wandered toward the front gate, as though he feared someone unexpected might arrive at any moment. Grief alone didn't explain that kind of nervousness, and the more Amara watched him, the more convinced she became that something else was weighing heavily on his conscience. After dinner, while the older women organized funeral arrangements inside the living room, Amara stepped onto the veranda, hoping the cool evening air would clear her mind. She found David standing alone near the railing, staring into the darkness beyond the gate. For several moments, neither of them spoke. They simply stood together, listening to the familiar chorus of crickets that had filled the night air throughout their childhood. Finally, Amara broke the silence by asking whether he had been getting enough sleep since their mother's passing. David offered a faint smile and shrugged, saying sleep wasn't exactly easy when every room in the house reminded him of someone who would never walk through it again. It sounded like a reasonable answer, but there was something rehearsed about it, as though he had repeated the same sentence several times already. Before Amara could ask another question, headlights swept across the compound as a silver sedan slowed outside the gate. Two well-dressed men stepped out carrying leather folders. They spoke briefly with David in voices too low for her to hear, but she noticed the expression on her brother's face change almost instantly. He looked less like a grieving son and more like a man cornered by a problem he could no longer postpone. When David noticed Amara watching from the veranda, he ended the conversation almost immediately. The two visitors returned to their vehicle without greeting anyone else, and David walked back toward the house pretending nothing unusual had happened. Amara asked who the men were, expecting a simple explanation, but instead she received an answer that felt strangely incomplete. He claimed they had been asking for directions to another neighborhood. It didn't make sense. Nobody drove across town in business attire carrying legal folders simply to ask for directions. And even if they had, why would they spend several tense minutes speaking privately with her brother before leaving? David quickly changed the subject, asking whether she had eaten enough and whether she wanted tea before bed. The sudden shift in conversation only deepened her suspicion. Throughout the rest of the evening, she caught him checking his phone repeatedly before slipping it back into his pocket whenever anyone came close enough to notice. Every instinct told her something important was being hidden, but she couldn't imagine what it could possibly be. Surely, in the middle of planning their mother's funeral, there couldn't be another tragedy waiting to reveal itself. Later that night, long after most of the relatives had gone to sleep, Amara wandered quietly through the familiar halls of the house. She paused outside her mother's bedroom, unable to bring herself to open the door again. Earlier that afternoon, she had spent nearly an hour sitting beside the neatly made bed, holding one of Mama Ngozie's favorite cardigans, while memories came rushing back faster than she could process them. She remembered being wrapped inside that same cardigan during storms as a little girl, because her mother insisted it was luckier than any blanket in the house. She remembered sitting beside her while learning to sew loose buttons back onto school uniforms. Every object in the room carried a story, making the silence feel almost unbearable. Aunt Grace had quietly reminded her that love was never measured by how many visits someone made, but guilt doesn't disappear simply because someone tells us to stop carrying it. Amara wondered how many people spent their lives believing there would always be another opportunity to say thank you, another holiday to come home, another chance to hug the people who mattered most. Too often life teaches us otherwise. Unable to sleep, she walked back toward the veranda where David's backpack rested against one of the wooden chairs. It wasn't curiosity alone that stopped her. A corner of a thick folder protruded from the partially open zipper, and across the top, she noticed an official-looking document stamped with bold lettering. She hesitated immediately. Looking through another person's belongings was something her mother would never have approved of. More than once during their childhood, Mama Ngozi reminded both children that trust, once broken, was difficult to repair. Amara almost walked away. She even reached the steps leading back inside before another thought stopped her in her tracks. If David truly had nothing to hide, why had those visitors looked so serious? Why had he lied about who they were? Why did he seem terrified every time his phone rang? Her concern for her family slowly outweighed her hesitation. Taking a deep breath, she gently pulled the folder from the backpack, promising herself she would only glance at the first page before putting everything back exactly as she found it. The first document appeared harmless enough. It contained measurements of land boundaries and recent photographs of the property. The second page listed market valuations prepared by a licensed real estate company. Amara frowned, trying to understand why anyone would need an appraisal while arranging a funeral. Then came another document detailing ownership records, followed by transfer paperwork that mentioned legal fees and closing costs. Her heartbeat gradually quickened as each page raised more questions than the last. She turned another sheet and discovered proof that a substantial payment had already been deposited into a bank account. Her hands began trembling. This was no preliminary discussion. Whatever these papers represented had already moved far beyond negotiation. Finally, she reached the last few pages where neatly printed signatures appeared beneath the heading of a legally binding sales contract. At first, she couldn't process what she was reading. Her eyes returned to the address several times, as though hoping she had misunderstood. But the words remained exactly the same each time she looked. The property described in the agreement was the only home she had ever truly known. It was the house their father had built. The house where Mama Ngozi had devoted her entire adult life. The house where relatives were currently sleeping while preparing for her funeral. According to the signed documents resting in Amara's hands, it no longer belonged to their family. She turned the final page with growing disbelief until one detail struck harder than everything else she had already seen. The contract had been signed just 3 days before Mama Ngozi passed away. That meant the decision hadn't been made after her death in response to funeral expenses or family emergencies. It had happened while their mother was still alive. Even more shocking was the signature at the bottom of the page. There was no mistake. David Akaffer had personally authorized the sale. The date, the initials, the notarized certification, and the financial records all pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. Amara felt the ground beneath her seem to disappear. Countless questions rushed through her mind at once. Did their mother know? Had she agreed to this? Had David somehow pressured her into signing documents she didn't fully understand? Or had he secretly arranged everything without telling anyone? The brother she had trusted her entire life suddenly felt like a complete stranger, and every conversation they'd shared since her arrival replayed inside her head with new meaning. The nervous glances, the mysterious visitors, the unanswered phone calls, and the forced smiles all fit together like pieces of a puzzle she never wanted to solve. Just as Amara tightened her grip on the folder, she heard slow footsteps behind her. Her heart pounded as she turned around. David stood a few feet away, his face drained of color. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He looked at the documents in her hands, then back into her eyes, fully aware that the secret he had worked so desperately to hide was no longer hidden at all. The silence between them carried years of shared childhood memories, family loyalty, and mutual trust, all hanging by a thread that seemed ready to snap. Finally, David exhaled deeply and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "You're not supposed to be reading that." Amara stared at him, unable to believe those were the first words he chose instead of an explanation. She slowly lowered the papers, fighting back tears that now came as much from betrayal as grief. Every answer she desperately needed suddenly depended on whether her brother would finally tell the truth, and deep inside she feared that whatever came next would change their family forever.